Hi everyone. Welcome to the third and final workshop in our UI UX design with Figma workshop series. And we can just jump right in. So just as a reminder of where we're at, 2 weeks ago, we went through setting up our accounts and going through the interface and adding some shapes and colors and text. And then last week we did some more intermediate design stuff. So those are our components, our instances, our auto layout, all that fun stuff. And then today we're gonna bring something to life. We're gonna add some motion, some interactivity. We're gonna have a new starting file, which you can see on the whiteboard, but I'll also show it on the screen soon. And this one is like an app that we're gonna use to kind of build out some animation and stuff. So yeah, go to this link, just type it into your browser, use whatever the same one you're using Figma with, and yeah, you should be then taken to this page. And again, we just click open in Figma and you get that, a copy.
That's the same link from last.
No, it's a different link. Yeah. And this is what this new one looks like. And don't worry, I'll go through it. There's a lot here. So, just like we did with the first week, and we kind of had the starting file from last week, we have our text styles, our color styles, some effects. I made a layout thing if you want to play around with. And then you'll notice that we have these three sections. And this is something that we haven't gone through yet, but if you ever want to create this section to group a bunch of your frames or other things together, it's just underneath your frame tool. So your frame tool is down here where it says region tools. If you just click this open, you'll see section, and that's what all of these are. And these are just another way to just group things, more visual. You could have a section for, let's say, a mobile app and a section for the website if you're going to design both platforms on the same file or something like that. And let's go through each section. We have our assets and components. So we have some color palette picker thing here. I made a bunch of those components like we did last week and they have a bunch of variants that you can play around with. Feel free to keep playing around with the file after this if you would like. We also do have some menus, all of those fun things, just a bunch of things that you can use with making a design. I've already made kind of like a mock one down here in the design section. And then we have this playground. This is going to be for us to learn animation, just to kind of not have to worry about all of these elements on every single screen. We're just keeping it pretty simple as we get started, and then we'll apply those to our design over here. And before we jump into kind of like animation prototyping magic, I want to talk a little bit about dev mode. So Figma has this dev mode, which you can access down here in your toolbar. And basically, what this is meant to do is if, let's say, you have a bigger team and you're the UX designer, you can go to, let's say, our app loading screen here on our design. And I'll zoom in a little bit using that Command plus. So you can say app loading screen, and you'll notice that there's this little code icon up in the top right of that. So when you click on the title for the frame, or you can also click on different elements, but usually you want to do it for the full frame. You'll see the code icon, and when you click that, it switches to green. And that basically just says, as a designer, that you have marked this as ready for development. So if you're going to be passing this on to a developer, this lets them know, hey, all of the major design stuff for this frame, it's good to go. You can start developing it. There might be some minor edits that come based on feedback or stuff, but this is just saying, hey, this is it's good to start developing. And then the developer, or maybe if you're your own developer, would switch into dev mode down here, and it'll give you a list of all of the things that are ready for development over here on the left. Now, what's really cool with the dev mode is that when you have something selected over here on the right, you'll notice that it gives you a bunch of different code pieces to help you with actually coding in your elements into a design. So with my app loading screen selected, I get my layer properties, which would be the sizing of stuff. This middle box is going to be your width versus your height. Padding is going to be any sort of space between your content and a margin or border. And then there would be your border and then margins on the side. In the list, we are in the code layout actually. And you'll see all these code that makes up this just this frame. So this is going to be your width, your height, these kind of background styles, and these are all using the CSS language. This is the coding language to style websites. You can click down on the down arrow to see your other options. If you want to make an iOS or in like an Apple app, you can either use Swift UI or UIKit. And if you switch to one of those, you'll see this same information, but just in this other coding language. And then they have the same for Android using Compose or XML. If you are interested in learning CSS, I am teaching the web coding series here. It starts in 2 weeks. So if you want to learn how to actually develop stuff. Yes. Yes. So the web coding series, the first one is going to be HTML. The second one is CSS, and then the third one is intermediate advanced CSS. So start from the basics, just like we did with this one. Yeah, of course. Now you'll notice also when I select on a element that has been marked as ready for development within the frame, this will change and it'll give me the code that's relevant for this specific thing. So this image, it's saying it's 332 by 332. There's no padding, no border. And then these over here are going to be our margins. So this is its spacing between different things. And again, we get the code. You do also see all of your assets down here. So if someone else handed you off something and you're developing it, but you don't have the original image files or anything like that, you can find them under your assets and you can download them. And you can either download them from the original source file. So this is like what the person uploaded, it's the same size, or you can download it exactly how much it's been resized in the thing. So this one I uploaded, it was 560 by 560, but then I scaled it down a little bit. So you can kind of decide, do you want the bigger image that was uploaded or do you want how it looks like in the design? And then other quick dev mode stuff before we jump back into kind of animation, which is the main focus, is down here, the main two tools you would probably use, or maybe even three, are going to be your color picker. If you ever need to get a specific color from somewhere for something, this is going to be your ruler tool, which you can use to do some measurements. This would be if you were to click somewhere, if you kind of have to zoom in a little bit with this one, it's a little finicky. But like over here, maybe I wanted to know the space between these two items. With this tool selected, you'll notice that an edge will turn red. And if I click and drag, I'll see the distance between something else if you ever need to measure. And then these two tools are going to be the annotation and the comment tools. These are going to be for kind of collaborating with others. If you need to leave comments directly in the design file that they can go directly to and see what you said and stuff like that, that's down here. Okay. So that's just a brief intro to dev mode. We're not going to go much deeper. So I'll switch back to the design option and we'll go back and I'm just gonna unmark this as ready for dev by clicking where we have that green and then just say remove status. And that just says, hey, it's not ready for development anymore. Cool. So we're gonna start learning about some different animation stuff. And what I want you to do is go over to your playground area. So as a reminder, if you ever need to kind of pan around your document when you're zoomed in, you hold down space and you click and drag, and you're just moving basically your view. And go to where you can see both the animation start and animation end frames. All right. So there are two main types of animation and prototyping in Figma. The first one is going to be any sort of motion between frames. So we're going to play around with that right now, but basically at a high level, what that means is when I click, let's say, a button here, and I say move over to this frame, when I click here, what kind of animation, what kind of motion does that actually do? The other type of prototyping and animation is changing between your variants. that we made. So last week we did the components and then the variants that are slightly different, and we just picked between them and like the properties over here. But you can actually animate between them. So an example of how we're going to do that is in our navigation menu. You'll notice that I've made ones for where if you like hover over, let's say the home icon, we're gonna change it to green. If we hover over this icon, we'll change this one to green. If we're clicking on it, it's going to change to this kind of style. That's another way that you can prototype and animate in Figma. All right, so let's actually see how some of this works. So let's add just a simple circle to our animation start frame over here. I'm going to hit O on my keyboard and just click and drag. And I'm going to hold down Shift to make a perfect circle. You can put whatever shape you want to do. This is just to play around. And then let's change the color. You can use either one of the color styles that I've already kind of picked out by clicking over here as a reminder, or you can just click within here and pick a custom color. I'm going to do mine with this primary, which is like a darker green, but feel free to pick whatever color you want. It does not matter. Now I want you to duplicate this circle on the animation end frame. So how we would do that is just you hold down Option or Alt and you click and drag and you can move it over to this other frame. Now, on this frame, I want you to change some stuff about this circle. So I'm going to resize it. I'm going to make mine smaller. You can make yours bigger. You can place it in a different location. And I also want you to change the color. And so I'm going to change mine to accent, so it's this lighter green. You don't have to do specifically what I'm doing, but just make sure that you have two circles, one on each frame that are different. And now we're going to switch over to our prototype tab right over here. So we've been working mostly in the design tab, but when we switch to prototype, we're going to have some different settings here. And so I'm going to click on my first circle on animation start. You can also just hover over it. And you'll notice that there's this circle that goes around our circle. It's kind of small. Right now mine's on the right, but you can move it to the bottom and stuff like this. When you're in the prototype tab, this is where you start to make a connection between something else. So if I click and drag, you'll notice it switches to a plus icon, and then I get this arrow. And so this is basically saying, hey, I want this first element. I'm going to do something with it, probably click on it, and then I want you to move to somewhere else. I want you to make some animation. So I'm going to do it where it's going to switch us over to this frame. So if you hover over your animation end frame around the kind of border, you'll see that your arrow should start from the big circle and then it should point directly to the frame. Yeah. If you go to the prototype tab, on the top right where it says design, if you switch to prototype, and then now you can hover over the circle, there's a circle, you click and drag to this other frame. You're welcome. And when I let go, I get this interaction pop up, and this is where we're going to start exploring some stuff. Cool. So the first thing is going to be our trigger. So this is like what event, what action do you want to start this animation or this interaction? So right now it's on tap, which is when you're clicking on something. But if you click here, you'll notice that there's a bunch of different options. So there's also on drag if you want to drag something. There's while hovering if you want to change something while hovering over it. While pressing is going to be if you're pressing on something. A key or keypad is going to be you have to click something on your like keyboard to activate it. We have mouse enter or mouse leave. So this is like what happens if you're like hovering over or when you're not. It's very similar to while hovering. There's also touch down or touch up, which is also very similar to while pressing. And then there's after delay, which we will do. This one is like just, I don't want you to do anything, but just take a little break of like a second and then start this thing. So we're going to leave it to on tap for now. And then we have our action. So this is like, what do we actually want to happen when we activate this trigger? So in this case, what do we want to happen when we click on this circle? And we have a bunch of options here, and we'll do a number of these. So we have navigate to, this is just simply move to a different frame. You can also change to, this is going to be that changing between your variants. We have our back if you want to back. You have scroll to if you want it to scroll somewhere within the current frame. We have open link if you want to embed like a link to somewhere else on the web in your Figma design. There's variables, variable modes, and conditionals. These are even some more advanced design topics that we're not going to get into. And then we have some stuff with overlays. This is if you want to create like a pop-up, basically. And we will do one of these in a little bit. So we can actually leave it to navigate to. Figma is actually pretty advanced that when you're doing certain movements where we clicked and dragged from our big circle to this other frame, it kind of knew what we were wanting to do. And then we have our destination. It's already set to our animation end frame, but you could change it to anything else from here if you accidentally dropped it somewhere. And then we have our animation, which is going to be our speed controls. We'll go through these in a little bit, so just leave it at instant for now. Now I'm going to click off of here. And now I actually want to show what this looks like. So over up here by this share button in the top right, underneath the present, you'll have two options, just in case if you ever want to do this. Present will open it up in a new tab, like so, but you can also do it where it's preview, and this will open it up as like a separate little window in here. Cool. So you can do either of these. I'm just going to do preview so that we can see it all at once. And so I'm going to go with my flow one. Figma creates what are called flows. So this is just like a series of your interactions or a series of the things that you're trying to prototype. You could have one flow that takes you through the entire app and the entire website, or you could create separate flows for like smaller things that you want to test. A great way to do this in like the actual UX design world is if you're testing with users and you want to see, hey, is it easy to check out with my e-commerce app? And you just want to create a flow for maybe a sample purchase, you could create that as separate from one that's like an account login. And so that you're only testing one thing at a time. With this flow, you can also present or preview directly from there. And then now, if I hover over my circle in my preview or in the present, either way, you'll notice that the cursor changes. So that means that this is interactive. And when you click on it, it switches to my other frame, which is exactly what we designed with our prototype connection right here. Okay. Now, your little challenge for right now to get used to this, I want you to prototype the other way. So right now, how we prototype it, I can't click on my smaller circle to go back to my animation start frame. That's your challenge. So we've done it where you go from animation start, you can click on the circle and you go to the animation end frame over here. Now from the animation end frame, I want to be able to click on this circle and get taken back here. I'll give you like 2-3 minutes and then I'll jump in and do it and show it. All right, that should hopefully be enough time. So now if we want to prototype the way back, we just make sure we're in the prototype tab. We hover over our circle. You can also click on it if you need. You go to the edge where there's this plus icon, click and drag to go to the animation start. And then you could make some changes to the animation properties, but I'm not going to do that yet because we're going to explore that in a second. And now we go back. So now we should have a little app where we can click back and forth between our two frames. So let's add a little bit more to these properties because right now it's just an instant switch, which doesn't look the greatest. So let's actually customize some of those animation properties so that that transition looks a little bit better. So if you ever need to edit one of your interactions, your animations, when you've already drawn the line, you can just click on that arrow that's in between them, and then you'll get that pop-up again. You can also click on the element that it starts from, and then over under prototype in interactions, you'll see the list right there, and you can go right here. All right. So let's open up this animation section, and we're going to play around with some of these. So we're going to start off with the first one, which is dissolve. And when you click here, you get some additional options. So I'm going to preview this without changing any of these things, just so you can kind of get a sense of what dissolve looks like. It's pretty standard. It just kind of slowly fades out and then it moves into the next. So if I repeat that, you'll notice it stays a little bit longer and then it slowly goes out. Now we have what's called a curve. And if you open up curve, these are what are called your interpolation curves. It's a big fancy word that basically says, what do you want to happen in terms of the timing between these frames? So it's in animation. Linear is going to be a constant time from start to finish. So if my dissolve is 300 milliseconds, which it says here in my duration, and I do linear, it's going to be the same speed across those 300 milliseconds. And so if I switch that, it's like linear. And if I were to really increase the time, you can just click in the duration and type in what time you want to do. It is in milliseconds, but let's say you wanted it to be like 5 seconds. You can type in 5s and hit enter, and it converts it to milliseconds, so you don't have to do any math in your head. And so this is a pretty long animation, and it's the same time throughout that whole 5 seconds. Okay. Might not make too much sense until we start exploring some of these other ones. So going back to this animation, go into curve. So we have our easing, which are different options for how we want um, this to either kind of speed up or slow down. Just to give it more of a visual, I'm gonna go from linear where it's clicked and click on custom Bezier. And when I do that, I get this graph of how my speed changes over time, which in this case, because it's a straight line from start to finish, starts in the bottom left, finishes in the top right. It's a straight line, which just means it's constant time over 5 seconds. If I were to change to ease in, which is a preset, I go back to custom Bezier, I get to see what that preset looks like. So you'll notice now that it's a little bit more of this curve. So what this means is that it's going to start off slower and then it's going to speed up into it. Basically, when you're looking for speed, it's the slope of the line. So if you remember from math, the slope is the rise over the run, or basically the angle of your thing. When it's flatter, it means that it's slower. When it's steeper, it means that it's faster. So easing in is basically that you're going to go slower into the animation and then it speeds up. So let's see how that looks like. So now it's really slow and then it starts to speed up. So if I go back, it starts off really slow. It's easing into our animation and then it speeds up a little bit more. Make sense? Cool. There's also ease out. And if we go ease out, then back to custom Bezier, we can see that this is just the opposite. It starts off fast and then it slows down. So this is our ease out. And just so that you see how that looks like, it starts off faster, and then you'll notice that this other one, it takes a little bit more time to come in. It's slower. Okay. Now we have ease in and out, and going back to custom Bezier, that means that it's slow at the beginning, it speeds up in the middle, and then it slows down at the end. Just to see what that looks like. Pretty slow, faster, and then slower. Typically, the kind of default, which I think it was when we started it, is an ease out. So basically you start the animation pretty quickly, anticipating that, and then it eases into the final result. If we do ease in back, and we do custom Bezier, you notice that the curve gets really crazy. So this one has a little weird situation that looks like it's not actually even working. So that's fun. I normally don't ever use these ones that say back at the end. These other ones, ease in, out, ease in and out, are basically all you'll ever need. But I'm going to go back to linear and then go back to custom Bezier because this curve is editable. So if you don't like any of the presets and you want to make your own, you can start to change that in our custom Bezier curve here. You just click on where one of your ends are, and you can start to create your own curve. So this is kind of like, I'm going really fast and then slow in the middle and then really fast at the end. And you can do angles and you can play around with stuff. So if you don't like the presets, just go to custom Bezier and you can make your own speed curve. Okay. How are we feeling about this? Cool. So let's just go back to ease out. I'm gonna go back to my default of 300 milliseconds. That way it's not taking so long to see every single animation. Now, dissolve isn't the only one. There is going to be smart animate and then these transition ones. So let's do the transition ones first, and then we'll talk about smart animate. So move in and out is if you want to move the frame, either the second frame or the frame you're on, based on whatever direction you choose. So move in, for example, is going to move in the second frame over on top of my first frame, whichever direction I want. So you can do either from coming from the left, coming from the right, coming from the top, or coming from the bottom. And you'll notice that there's this little animation thing that kind of helps you make sure that you're doing the right one. So let's just keep it at left, just so we can see what that looks like. So when I click here, my second frame goes over. I will do that again. Makes sense? Cool. You will notice in here that there's this animate matching layers option. So first, without that, you'll notice that the entire second frame comes over. Now, maybe I don't want that because it looks a little weird. The navigation menu and the header image are the exact same. So I wouldn't maybe expect for those to like move in over. So if I were to do animate matching layers and I go back, it's only going to do whatever is not common between the two. Okay. Now, how it looks at that is if you'll notice in your animation start and your animation end that the names are the same. But you might notice a little bit of an issue. Our circles are named the same too. So they're animating it in this kind of funky way where it's not what I would expect for moving in, right? I would expect it to still have that move in from the left. So if you ever see this and this is not what you want and you instead want it to move in, you just have to rename one of these. So if I rename my first ellipse to, let's say, ellipse 14 instead of 13, and then now I go back to that, you'll notice I get what I was intending to do of that moving in from the left of that other piece of the frame, right? So that animate matching layers section looks between the two different frames that you're doing and looks at the names of your items. And if the names are the same, they're going to apply that smart animate. That's basically what that does. But we'll play around with that some more. Move out does the pretty much the same thing as move in, but instead of it being that your second frame is coming on top of your first frame moves out of the way so that it reveals the second frame. So now with move out selected, if I preview, now my big circle is moving out instead of my small one, right? So that's move out. Then we have push, which is kind of like a blending of the two, I would say. So push just basically instead of it being like, oh, your frames are different layers, one's moving on top of one of the other, one's moving behind. Push is just kind of they're on the same level. And as you move one in, the other one gets moved out. So when I do push, it does this cool effect where it's kind of just pushing the frame out. This is super helpful in like actual design. If you want to have, let's say, like this is a phone, it's a pretty small screen width-wise. Maybe you want to have like a really long picture and where someone clicks on a button, it kind of like moves them to the other part of the picture, but it looks seamless. Like, on like Instagram carousels where they do the thing where you just scroll and it's like this continuous picture. That's kind of how you could simulate something like that in here. All right. Now we just have two more here. So we have our slide in and our slide out. Basically, what slide in and slide out are it's the same as move in and move out, but it adds a dissolve to it. So if I do slide in, let's say, you'll notice now there's a little bit of the dissolve on that one that's being replaced, right? So it kind of dissolves out, or if you were to do slide out, the next one kind of just it adds a dissolve, but it's the same as moving. Okay. And the last one that we have to go through is this smart animate. So if I switch from slide out to smart animate, you still get your curve settings. So this is your speed over which time you want to do. And I'm going to change my duration just to like 3 seconds so that you can see this a little bit better. So now with Smart Animate, basically that's doing what you're looking at the existing frame and the next frame, and it's going to find what's common and it's going to move in between them. So right now with Smart Animate, you'll notice that it does this weird kind of long dissolve thing. And that's because I still haven't renamed my ellipse back to my ellipse 13. So Smart Animate looks at the name of your layers. That's why it's important. So if I do 13, let's say, and I go back, you'll notice now Figma is automatically seeing what properties are on my circle. So it's seeing that I'm going from a bigger, darker green circle in the top left to a smaller, lighter green circle in the bottom right. And so when you smart animate that and they have the same layer name, you'll notice it's going to actually move and then gradually change color and size. So I'm going to reopen up my animation properties. There's one last thing here that I want to share with you before we start kind of building out this actual design stuff. So under the curve, if you open it up, you'll notice that there's these options over here down in the bottom that we haven't gone through yet. So these are what are called spring presets, whereas these were your Bezier presets. These are spring presets. And these are basically like if you want to add a little bit of physics to your object. So like maybe you want to have like an image bounce in almost like it's a bouncing ball, and you want to simulate some like real world physics motions. This is where you would do stuff like that. So we have our presets of gentle, quick, bouncy, and slow. So if I do gentle, and I'm going to actually get rid of my other circles so we don't get too crazy. You'll notice that it has a little bit more like dynamics than what we were doing before. So I'll just redo that. It's a little bit like, I don't know why it's called gentle. It looks a little fast to me, but apparently it's gentle. It has a little bit more kind of motion. We have quick, which this is going to be if you want it to go pretty fast and it's a little bouncy at the end. You also have your bouncy one if you want it to be like truly bouncy and kind of really spring back and forth. And then we have our slow, which is basically the opposite of quick, where it's just a little bit more slower, but still has a little bit of that kind of physics part of it. Now, if you were to switch from any of these to custom spring, you'll notice that you get a different um, graph than our Bezier, and you have your 3 settings right here. So the first one is going to be our stiffness. So this just is like pretty much what it says, just basically how stiff is the object, how hard is it to move around. So if I switch this to like 200, you'll notice that pushes the curve over here. You can change with this little button, it kind of changes your stiffness or your damping. So the lower value means that it's stiffer. So if I were to do like a stiffness of 1, that means that this is like pretty hard to move, right? But then if I switch to, let's say, a stiffness of 200, that means that this object would move pretty easily. So it's just adding tension basically to your animation. We also have your damping. The damping is going to be whatever friction you want to apply to the motion. And basically this just means that a higher value means that the motion will slow down faster. If you were to do a damping of 0, that means that this motion is going to go on forever because there's no friction, there's no force that is stopping this motion. And so with a damping of 0, it's just going to bounce back and forth until you get annoyed with it and you quit the preview. Now, when you put the damping higher, so let's say we do like 100, that means it's gonna have like quite a bit of friction. It's gonna slow down, right? And then we have mass, which this is just basically the greater the mass, the more force you need to move something. Just think of it as like heavier. So with a mass of 1, it should be pretty easy to move our object, which it looks like it is. And then when you add the mass, let's say we were to change it to 50, it's gonna feel heavier, so it's a little bit harder to move, even though I didn't change my other settings. Okay. I will be honest with you, most of the time when you're doing these animations, you can rely pretty heavily on your ease in or ease out. Pretty much everyone just uses those. Now you'll notice that there is this state option in the bottom of our interaction panel. And this is going to be when you have your components and your variants and you're animating between those. If your variants have a specific state set to something, you'll want to pay attention to these. So there is your reset scroll position. So basically, this is if you go from one page, you go to the next page, and then you go back to the original page. Do you want the user to be at the same exact scroll position that they were or somewhere else? Then there's this reset component state. So when your components and their variants have a state, you will want to determine on like whether or not you want to stay with the variant. So the example of this would be, let's say you were to prototype something, you have a user who says yes to a checkbox that says email me marketing communications. Then they navigate to a different page and they come back. Do you still want that checkbox marked or not? If you say reset component state, whatever you check on one page, you move away, you go back, it's reset. It wouldn't be checked anymore. But without it, you can go back and forth, and whatever variant it switched to, whatever you did, will stay the same as you switch back and forth between all these different screens. Okay. I want you to click over in the prototype tab, but the design section in the file. So we have our iOS home screen. I just kind of mocked up this using that iOS design kit that I shared. I think it was last week. And I made this kind of fake app icon for this coffee shop. And basically, we want to start our flow here. And then we're going to kind of take the user through this journey of this coffee shop app. So I'm going to have my iOS home screen frame selected. And then over in the prototype tab where it says flow starting point, I'm going to create my new flow. So as a reminder, this is just a set of interactions, basically a workflow that you're testing out. You can give it a name if you want to give it a specific name, but you can also just keep it as flow 2. That's fine. Okay. So now you can click out of there. And then you'll notice our frame is a component that has a bunch of things. So you're probably going to have to click in a couple times. So if you click in twice into your iOS home screen frame, you should be able to kind of either click on our coffee shop logo or hover over it and see these plus icons. And we're going to move from when you click on here, we get to our app loading screen. And so you can just click and drag like we were doing before and drop it. And now we have our interaction. Yes, I want to do my trigger of on tap, meaning when I click on this, I want this thing to happen. Yes, I want my action to be navigating to somewhere else. And yes, I want my destination to be my app loading screen. For the animation, instead of smart animate, I am going to do a, let's say, dissolve. And for the curve, I am going to go into a ease out preset. All right. So now just to kind of see what we've done, I'm going to click on preview. I'll see this kind of iPhone screen. I can click on my coffee shop icon and it'll take me to my app loading screen. Just a note, if you're ever doing this preview or you're doing the present where it's in a new tab and you click somewhere else that doesn't have any interactivity, nothing's going to happen. It'll just highlight, hey, click here. that's where there's some interaction. Cool. So now we have our loading screen, and we want this loading screen to animate between here and our account access screen. So this time we're not doing something from a button, but you can also prototype directly from the frame. So if I click on the frame title of app loading screen and I hover over my sides of my frame, you'll get the plus icon again, and you can click and drag to move it over to our account access screen. Now it's going to save most of what I did from my last interaction and bring it over to this one. However, I don't expect users to tap on the screen when they see a loading screen. This should just happen once it's loaded. So instead of the trigger being on tap, we can switch it to after delay. And this is going to be just saying, hey, after a certain amount of time, we want you to do this animation, this interaction. So we can leave it at 800 milliseconds. Our animation is still set to dissolve, but because I have the same logo between both my loading screen and my access screen, and I have the same background, Smart Animate would probably be a good option for this one. So if I switch to Smart Animate and I can leave it at 300 milliseconds, this will check all of the elements between these two and do some fun animation that we don't have to set everything for. So going back to what this looks like, I can open up my flow, have my home screen, I click on my app, it loads the loading screen, and then after a short delay, it moves my icon up, and then it kind of fades in my buttons. Pretty cool, right? All right. So now we are going to simulate if a user clicks login or register or continue as guest, that something else happens. So for continue as guest, if I hover over that, I want this to be, I click on this and I get sent to a frame that has this user homepage. Now, I have one that just says Hello Digital Lounge as if the Digital Lounge was a user, but you might want to simulate one, create a second frame. You can just duplicate this and change Digital Lounge with just hello or something like that if you wanted to simulate it being a guest. But so for continue as guest, I'm just going to click and drag and move it over to our homepage user for now. It'll be an on tap. And I'm going to switch back to my dissolve. So we have one button on our account access screen ready to go. But now we want to have our login and our register. Now you might notice I don't have anything over here for it. But if you go up to our assets and components section, I do have a login overlay and a register overlay designed here. So now with login, I'm just going to click the plus icon over by our interactions. So far we've been like hovering over an element and clicking and dragging. And that's useful for when it's all going to be navigation, when it's all going to be just things that you're going from frame to frame. But now I want to go somewhere else. So I can just click on this plus icon for interactions, and that will add an interaction. So on tap, that's good. We're going to click on this button. For action, we want to do our open overlay because what I want this to be is like a pop-up login screen instead of it being like you're taking to a completely different full-sized page. So I can click open overlay. And for the overlay, you're going to want to find the frame that the overlay is, which in this case is called login overlay. And now we get a bunch of these different options. So the first one is the position. So you can place this overlay to be perfectly centered in your frame, where it's from on the top left, top center, top right. You're basically just aligning it somewhere here. If you designed your overlay to be the exact same size as this frame, all of these will basically do the same thing. But because my overlay is smaller than this frame that I'm animating from, this does matter because this is going to determine where it's placed. So I do like centered for this, it makes sense. But if you switch to manual, you'll notice that there's this little kind of ghost overlay of our login overlay, and you can actually physically place it where you want to be if you don't like any of those presets. But I'm just going to switch back to centered, and that just makes sure that it's perfectly centered. Then we have our two options, right? So the first one is going to be close when clicking outside. So this is basically like if you have your phone and you get a pop-up notification, if I click outside, like in the background, does that close the the overlay? So I'm gonna turn this to off for now, just to show you what it looks like. But you can also turn it back on. And then we have our background. So this is gonna be, what do you want to happen to our account access screen frame when there's an overlay on top of it? And in this case, it's, hey, I want to make it slightly darker. I want to add a 25% black color on it just to kind of make it darker, make it look like there's harder to see back there. Usually you want to do something like this. Maybe you can add a blur, stuff like that. You want to have something in the background so that the focus is on the overlay of the pop-up. And then we have the animation. So this is instant, but you could also do dissolve or move in. Because this is an overlay, none of the other options work. So we can just do a move in. That makes sense. And let's move in from the top. So that would be down. So the direction is going to be going from the top to the bottom. Okay, so we've done a little bit, and now I want us to be able to see what this looks like. So I'm going to go back to my flow starting point, which is over here on my home screen. I'm going to click my preview. I can click on my app icon button. It takes me to my loading screen. After a slight delay, it goes and smart animates in my other stuff. I can click on login, and my overlay moves from the top, and there's a slight black darkening in the background. Probably make it a little bit stronger in this case. Now you'll notice, I think this is when I prototyped it as an example, and then I forgot to remove it. If you click on the email and the password, it just autofills something. I'll show you how to do that, but don't worry. And I also think I maybe did the close thing. So you can click on the X button to close it. So how I would do something like that is you'll notice that in my text entry, I have a bunch of these different ones. So we have enter your username, create a password, and all of these things. If you want to prototype between them, I don't know why it's already doing it. Actually, it doesn't look like there's any prototyping here. You can just click on this element, and then you can just click the plus and drag over to the other one where it's filled in. And you'll notice that the action now is just change to instead of navigate. So far, we've been navigating from frame to frame. Change to is that we're simulating a change from one component variant to another. So in this case, we're changing from the one that is our username that is unfilled with existing data to one that has it filled in, and that's just whenever you click on this one over here. The really great thing about components with animation is when you animate it once, it animates all across the instances in your design. So I want to show you that real quick. Or let's make sure that we can get there first. So go back up to your login overlay. You'll notice this is where the prototyping was. So on the actual login overlay, if you click on the enter your email, you'll notice that there's this variant interaction up here. This is just something that I published it with and forgot to remove it for playing around. You can also see the same thing for your password. And then we have our submit, which right now it's a tap and then navigate to none. Instead, when a user submits this login, I want to take them to my home page. So instead of navigate to none, we'll just change it to the name of our frame, which is homepage user. So now when we hit submit, we will animate over there. And instead of a gentle, I will do ease out again. Another thing I forgot to remove apparently is the closing the overlay. So if you click on the X up here, you'll notice that interaction. This is basically just, I did a thing where you click on the X, you tap, and the action is close overlay. And that allows you to close or move in those pop-ups. Okay, so now just to make sure we can get there. Previewing flow 2, click on my app icon, delay, goes in, log in, I get my overlay, I can fill in my email and my password and hit submit, and I should get to my home screen. Cool? All right. So now what I want us to do is troubleshoot an issue that we're seeing, and then we're going to animate our menu. So we're going to focus on this menu on our homepage. So the issue that we're seeing, if I go back to my preview, and I go through the login process, we get all the way through. I don't see my navigation menu right here. And I have to scroll down to see it down here. Now, most apps, as you know, the menu is fixed there. So you're kind of scrolling, but you can always have access to the menu no matter where you're at in here. So now let's troubleshoot that first, and then we'll animate. So if I go to my homepage user and I have my menu right here, I can notice that from both my design and from my navigation menu over here, that this is not the main component. This is an instance. And you can hover over this and it'll say instance 2. Basically, what this means is whenever we animate or prototype from here, what's probably going to happen is that it's not going to apply to all of our other menus, which doesn't make sense. I don't want to keep doing the same thing over and over again. I want to just do it once. So I'm going to go to that main prototype up in our assets and components section, and I can find that right here under navigation menu, and we have this right here. I'm going to go over to our prototype settings, and we have our scroll behavior. And so this is going to be where we're going to edit those things of what happens when we scroll. So there's scroll with parent, which basically just means whatever the parent frame is or the parent element, if that's being scrolled, scroll with it. But if we switch it to fixed, let's look how that looks now. So I'm going to go here, here, go through, log in, boom, boom, submit. It's still at the bottom. All right, go back. Let's do sticky and see what that looks like. Boom, boom. And it still didn't do anything. Okay, the instance was not switched. So let's do our fixed position again from here. I don't know why it's not applying to everything. And let's see. There we go. So maybe they changed it. I thought changing it to fixed up here would change it to all instances, but it looks like it did not. So go back down to your instance down here, click here in the prototype tab. Under scroll behavior, the position should be fixed, which is stay in place. And then now, when you get to there, boom, boom, our menu is stuck in the place that we want it to be, and we can scroll through our app, and we always have access to our menu. Okay, so now that we have access to our menu, we want to make sure that when we click on home, it takes us to the home page. When we take on this little marker tool, it goes to our locations. When we click on the coffee button, it takes us to the menu. And when we click on the cart icon, it takes us to our cart. So what we can do is go up back into our assets and components, and you'll notice that there's these small icons down over here. And if I click on them and I can scroll around, this is our main component. So when we do prototype from here, it should apply to everything. I thought I was going to do it before, so we'll see if it does again. So basically, when I have my home icon selected, I can click on the plus for interactions. On tap, my action, I want to navigate to homepage user. Right now, it's an instant animation, but I probably want to do something slightly different. I'm just going to switch it to dissolve so that there's a little bit of animation there. So I'm going to get out of there, and you'll notice that I have this line that also got added. This one, if you notice, is, oh, that's my submit button. Okay, but if I click down over here, now my home icon, all of them point to my home. If you prototyped it from down here, it's only going to apply to this home icon. But since we did it from that main one up here, now you'll notice that every time we have a home icon, it's pointing to our home page. So that's why last week when I was saying these components and instances and stuff, you'll want to make sure that you're creating some of those. Makes prototyping and animation pretty easy. That's why. All right. Now, small little challenge for you. We have our other three icons. Prototype the marker icon to go to the locations, the coffee icon to go to the menu, and the cart icon to go to the cart screen. All right, hopefully you got the hang of that. So I'll just show you how you do it if you needed help. So you go to your marker icon. You can click either on the dragging from here, this plus icon, over to locations, or you can add an interaction, on tap, navigate to our locations with whatever animation you want. And I can just confirm that that works. When I click elsewhere, it adds location from all of my options. I'm going to click on my coffee icon, plus interaction, on tap, navigate to our menu, and also with a dissolve. And then do the same for our cart icon. Navigate to cart with a dissolve. And so now if I click around in my section, I should get a bunch of these connections to kind of show that it's all working. So just to see what we've all done so far, we can start our preview, click our icon. You can go into the login. You can also click continue as guest to get to the same page. We can also click between our different menu options. And if you want to make sure that these just all stay in place, just remember you can click on the actual navigation menu and change it to fixed stay in place. It looks like the menu one was already set to that, but you can switch the other ones and now your menu will always be on the bottom and you can always switch between these different screens. All right. I have one last little interaction animation type thing I want to show you how to do. And then I will show you a little bit of FigJam, which is that online whiteboard tool, if you would like. And that's about it. It's a pretty simple workshop today. So basically, prototyping our app, we're going through, we're able to do a bunch of things. But you'll notice in our menu, I see these other menu options. I can't get to them though. They're stuck over there in the ether, and I would like to order whatever those are, but I can't get to them. So we gotta fix that in our design. So if you go over here, you'll notice that we have a bunch of our different items, and there is 6. So there's 2 that you can't even see. So what I want you to do for hot drinks is if you click and drag and just select the 6 here. So you should see 6 purple squares. Go over to our design tab and we're going to make it an auto layout frame. Does anyone remember from last week how you make it an auto layout frame? Yes. Yep, exactly that. So if we click toggle auto layout, they now group all of those menu items into our frame. Now we have this, which is called clip content. So if I were to have that off and I resize my auto layout frame, you'll notice that the stuff that are outside of that frame, it still shows. But if I turn clip content on and I start to resize my frame, anything that's not within my frame bounding box will not show, which we want. So I want you to reframe your auto layout to be shorter than the width of our screen. So just don't have it go all the way off. So with clip contents on, we're going to go to just shorter than our frame. I am going to leave a little bit of an image here to kind of show like, hey, there's more stuff. You can also, if you want to, go all the way down to here and maybe design like a little slider or something that shows, hey, you're only seeing part of the options. But for now, we're just going to, oops, wrong thing, have it where it shows a little bit here. Now I'm going to switch over to my prototype tab, and we have under our scroll behavior, we have our overflow. So this is going to be whatever behavior you want to happen for things that are outside of this frame. So no scrolling means I can't move within this frame. But we also have horizontal, vertical, in both directions. So as a reminder, vertical is up and down, horizontal is left and right, and both would be all of those. So in this case, we have more stuff on the right side, so we would want to set this to horizontal scrolling. So now, if I were to go back to my flow preview and we see how this works, I can do my login, go all the way through. I can go to my cart or my menu, excuse me. And then now I can actually move between the different menu items in my auto layout frame to see more. Yeah. So I will do it with the cold drink ones. So go to the design tab, and if you click and drag and select all of your elements, so for cold drinks, I have 6 here. And then under layout, we'll click this toggle auto layout button. Then we have to toggle our clip content option on. Now we have to resize our frame to actually clip some of that content. So I'm just going to click and drag from my right over to my left and have it somewhere around there. And then once you have this set up, you'll go over to the prototype tab, and under scroll behavior where it says overflow, we change it from no scrolling to horizontal. And then now with that set up, when we go through our preview or when you do the present option, it does the same thing. And we go to our cart, we can actually move between all of the things in our frame. Yeah, you're welcome. All right. So animation prototyping, pretty fun in Figma. You don't have to design a prototype for every single interaction a user may possibly take. Prototypes aren't going to be what you fully publish ever. They're normally just to get a sense of what the design is looking like before it's pushed to development, getting a sense for the interactivity. And so you may notice that there's like 18 different menu items in here. You don't have to prototype every menu item so that when someone clicks on it, it adds to the cart or it opens up a different overlay of the different things. You'll notice I created one for like a drink overlay or a food overlay. If you're testing this with users, you would probably guide them a little bit. So instead of it being like add a drink to your cart, it would be add a cold brew to your cart. And then you know that they're going through the specific steps that you've already designed and prototyped. So that way you don't have to keep on designing multiple different versions of the same screen and all of this stuff. We did not prototype this to open up the overlay, but it's pretty much the same exact thing as we did with the login. So now let's just take a brief little look at FigJam, which is that online whiteboarding tool. And so if you want to get back to the home page of Figma from here, you just click on your Figma icon and you'll click back to files. And that takes us back to our files here. If you want to create a FigJam board, it's this button up here, right by design. And this is FigJam, very basic, kind of designed for collaboration. If there's multiple people, you'll see them all up here where you have yourself. This is really helpful for if you're trying to kind of share design ideas or get stuff from maybe some like executive level stakeholders who don't know how to use Figma or stuff. This is pretty simple. You can use little things like these AI templates and diagrams to start with stuff. You can also add little sticky notes and type sticky notes in here if you want to make like a board of ideas and everyone can place their sticky notes and it says whose idea it was. You can also use the pen tool, or I guess it's called a marker, to draw in here if you need to point to stuff or if you just want to do like a quick little mock-up drawing. But you can switch between different like tapes if you want it to be a little bit more fun. There's these shapes right here that you can use. They don't have as much as Figma does. And then you have your standard, your text. your sections, which we did a little bit earlier today, if you want to make a table and importing stuff. You also have stamps if you want to do basically little emojis for what people do. Maybe you want to facilitate something where everyone uses sticky notes to put in their ideas, and then you use a heart stamp to say which ones that you like. You can have your comments as well if you need to add comments to leave for other people. And then we have our actions. And our actions is basically some of those AI things. There is a find and replace if you need to find words and replace it with something. There is also our minimizing, showing UI, some keyboard shortcuts. This one, if you have like a non-education plan, gets like a lot more options, like first draft, where it's like prompt engineering, like you can chat GPT basically a design. Same with the Figma stuff that we've been working with. But yeah, this is a pretty simple way. If you ever need to set a like timer, if you're like trying to do like a fast design idea type stuff, you can set a timer. You can also add little music to be playing, like a little record player. And then you can just share here so that people can um, kind of collaborate with you. Kind of more for just ideation, getting ideas, working with other people before jumping into something like this design file that we were working with.